Actually, I said good afternoon. My body is saying to me good morning. Forgive me, but I got off a plane late last night and everything in my body is screaming, sleep, sleep. And of course, all day you've been listening and I've been listening along and you've been thinking about social and storytelling and even BMWs. And the only thing I've been thinking about is, why did they give me the very, very, very last slot? What did I do wrong that I am the last presenter on the day? Peter, you'll have to tell me afterwards. But today is a special day, and I think maybe the reason is here. It's a special day here, of course. When I was invited, they just had to say the word Istanbul, and I said yes, which was not a very good negotiating procedure. But there's 3 places in the world I love. It's Rio, it's Cape Town, and it's Istanbul. But the other part was that today, the 5th of December, is a very special day in Holland, which is half of my roots. Because today is Santa Claus Day in Holland. And all the little kids, and I grew up as a little kid in Holland, they live in total fear and admiration of this man, Santa Claus. He comes by boat from Spain, but what we all know is that originally he came from Turkey. And if you don't do the right things throughout the year, and the Santa knows, he keeps a list, you get punished. So maybe that's why I have the last slot. I'm not quite sure yet. But who am I? This slide is here mostly for me, because I'm so jet-lagged, I'm trying to remember. I'm Dutch and American, I mentioned that, but professionally, I'm a marketer like you. Now I'm a marketing consultant, but as Peter mentioned, I was at Unilever for 15 years. And for the last 20 years, my wife and I have been based in New York, although my wife likes to say that I live in a little place called Boeing, sometimes move to a village called Airstream or Airbus, but New York, she says, I'd like to see you a few days here before I agree with that. And the company I represent and the insights I'd like to share with you, I guess the stuff that we're excited about is actually from a company called Effective Brands, which we set up about 12 years ago. And what we do and what we look at, we're very global. We like learning from global brands, and that's the title of this presentation, because we think that actually in the success and the failures of global brands, there's something for every marketer to take away and say, I can apply that in my local market, in my day-to-day job. And that's why we're also in Turkey. I'm very honored that my colleagues here from Turkish representatives are here from Effective Brands. But let me get to what we do. Because we think at a global level with brands around strategy, so what do we stand for, and the point purpose has come across a few times today, but also then once you know the strategy, what is the structure, the delivery mechanism inside the company to deliver the strategy? Who does what? And also, once everybody's clear on their role, how do we equip people for success? How do we train people with the information, the case studies, and the actual skill training so that they can do their job within the marketing organization? So that's what we look at. Now, 20 minutes is not a long time, so what I'd like to focus on is 3 things. The first, and I'll build on our research here, is what do we see as we look at CMO discussions around the world as the top 3 challenges that are keeping people awake at night? And then I'd like to talk a little bit about purposeful positioning, which all credits to MCT. When you look at today's program, there were so many different dimensions, but it did boil down to a few very key things. And I think purpose and brand purposeful positioning is one of them. And finally, I'd like to look at the inside of the organization and say, if you buy into that, what are the implications in today's social and digital world for how we organize within marketing and within the company? So if I can sort of give you 1 or 2 things to take away that might be practical and you can apply, then it will have been worth me getting into a plane of Turkish Airlines last night at JFK. So some of the things I'm going to be mentioning are based on a very deep study that I don't have enough time to explain, but it is the Leading Global Brands project. It's been going on for over 11 years now, and we study very closely what makes global brands work. So first, from that research, what are the challenges when we talk to chief marketing officers, marketing leaders, heads of global brands, heads of regional brands, what do they see as their 3 key challenges? Well, the first big surprise is social. Okay, but that's easy. What about social is it that they find interesting or challenging? And I think the first one we call the solar panel question, which is a little bit like solar energy. You know that social and digital is the future. We know it's good because it's one-to-one connection, we can learn and we can interact, but nobody really knows how to measure it, whether it weighs off, trades off versus all our other marketing expenditures and efforts. So no one dares take the full step and say, yeah, that's it, that's the future, that's what I'm doing. We're all sort of trying to find our way into it, and no one, like this house, is saying, it's it, solar is the future, I'm going to paste my roof because I'm committed. One of the big challenges of social, therefore, is how do we measure it, and how much of it do we do now? A second is built on this insight that Prince Harry recently reminded us of, which is that it's no longer true that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. He found out the hard way when his grandmother called him. But when we do things, or when our brands do something that's not compatible with what we stand for, in today's social age, it's very quickly known everywhere. And finally, within social, there are so many new skills and new roles. What do we do? What does our agency do? What do our partners like Twitter and Facebook do? So what's actually the core competency of marketing in this new world? It's a really big question. The second challenge that the CMO talks to us about is this theme of purpose. Because to be quite frank, being green or sustainable is just not enough. That is the table stakes for doing business in today and tomorrow's society. But there's a lot of greenwashing going on. What is the thing beyond that a brand stands for? And in a very flat world, where basically you can't buy a bad car anymore, you can't go into a supermarket and buy a product that isn't, doesn't taste well. There's no bad quality. So if there is a commoditization across everywhere, what is it that's going to take you to differentiate above that? And it might be purpose. And this is a picture of the Dove team in Unilever 10 years ago, in their underwear, as you can see. They were so motivated about a campaign that I'll just touch upon briefly in a minute. What is it that inspires our marketers? Because let's be frank, when you talk to CMO and any leader, the good people always have a choice. They always have 3 other opportunities. Why do they want to work for us? What inspires them? And the third area is being global. The time that we could do our own little thing in our own little market is completely gone. And I think I'm preaching to the converted here, because we do a lot of work with global brands. And it's funny how the list of the countries that are always difficult to work with is always the same. It's Germany, it's America, it's Japan. But the list of the countries that everybody likes working with is also always the same across all our clients. It's Brazil, it's Canada, sometimes it's Holland, but it's also very often Turkey, because this global mindset seems to be ingrained in the culture here. I don't think it's surprising when you have a bridge that masks one part of the world with another part of the world. But what we all know is, of course, that there is no global market, there is only local markets. So what marketing leaders are grappling with everywhere is, how do you make that work in a matrixed organization? How do you actually combine global purpose of a brand with local activation and make those two consistent, but nevertheless not a compromise? You can't have vanilla, because then everybody loses. So those are, if you like, the 3 key challenges. But I guess you didn't come here to hear the problems. I'd like to share some insights that we have on what does it take to win. And I wouldn't be a consultant. Sometimes people listen to what we do and then they finally very carefully say, but it sounds like you're a consultant. And we're like, yes, that's exactly what we are. We are not ashamed to be consultants. What a good consultant does is 2 things, I think. It provokes new thinking, and 2, it gives you a framework which you can then apply to your own business. Well, here is my simple attempt to give you one framework today that you could take home and apply it to your brand. And as any good framework, it has 2 axes. It's about brand purpose, and it's about how you organize within your marketing team to deliver that brand purpose. Let me explain. The first axis is all around how high is your ambition level on brand purpose. And the second is about how open are we as an organization. I'm quickly going to run through both. The first is about purpose. Now, there's 3 levels here. Functional, we've all done marketing school. 2, emotional, we know that. But 3, purposeful. Let me quickly elaborate. Functional. HTC, the phone company. Let me ask you, I can see into the audience, how many people can say that they knew the HTC brand 5 years ago? Very few hands. How many people today know HTC? Yeah, everybody. Okay, one more question. How many people today feel they could stand up and describe the HTC brand as a person? No one. I couldn't even do it, and I've researched it. Because HTC stands for functional benefit, basta. That's all they stand for. Their communication is always about speed, about megapixels, about the size of the memory. They are a purely functional brand, and we know the risks of being that, because one day the next brand will come along. Secondary level of emotional engagement is when indeed you've got consumers that are willing to interact with you. And I like this example from AB InBev, the world's largest beer brewer, and their brand Stella Artois. They actually have an online société that you have to become a member of, and people really sign in, people really spend time there, the average is 12 minutes, to learn about the brand, to learn how to serve it, and to actually interact and give ideas on how they use the brand. Clearly, there's much more than a functional bond here. There's now a relationship going on between brand and consumer. And the third level is purposeful positioning. It's when you stand for something bigger than just making a lot of money. And I want to give you some examples to make this alive. One goes back 10 years ago, and I'll explain why in a minute. This is Dove. Do you remember this commercial? Sound, please. Now, when this started 10 years ago, 11 years ago actually, people thought it was a nice communication idea, perhaps a campaign, but actually it's a purpose. Over the last decade, Dove and the Dove staff and the teachers that have downloaded the Dove kit have actually taken more than 7 million kids throughout the world through a training program of 2 hours that explains to them that what they see in fashion magazines is not real beauty. When you are talking about a true purpose, time is also not a challenge. I'd like to show you the campaign that just won the highest award at Cannes for interactive campaign, and you may remember the theme. This is actually today, Dove.
Muffin top, jelly rolls, need a bigger bust. Messages like these taunt you, prey on your insecurities, and make you feel bad. In fact, Dove discovered that only 4% of women believe that they're beautiful, a statistic so disturbingly low, we decided to do something about it. Dove created the Ad Makeover, a Facebook application that lets you replace those feel bad ads with messages designed to make women feel good instead. Here's how it works. Select a message. Choose who you want to send it to. Then send your message to millions of women. Your message takes the place of ones designed to make women feel bad and helps them feel beautiful instead. Join us on our mission to make more women feel beautiful.
It just shows that when you actually have a purpose behind the brand, and I always describe it as the difference between taking some of your colleagues, maybe the ones that are here today, to a bar and describing your job, and they're impressed because it's a big responsibility or a big budget, that's nice. But purpose is about being able to explain what you do to your mother, and she says, I know about that, that's really good. There's a real difference, and you feel it here. Dove gets that, and that makes things timeless. It also means it can cross borders. But it isn't just for high interest categories. I want to show you one other example of something that we've worked on, which is a paint brand. I mean, how much lower interest than paint can you get? Let me just show you what AkzoNobel did for that. They actually had the insight that when you change the color of the walls around you in poor neighborhoods and ghettos, starting in Brazil with the favelas, crime goes down. People feel better. And they started giving away paint to poor communities. And by now they've done this to over 10,000 communities worldwide. It just shows that if you have a real purpose behind your brand, the manifestation of it becomes much simpler and actually starts involving not just consumers, but also employees. And that's what I'll get to next. Just to summarize then this side of the graph, you need to be really honest about yourself and particularly about your brand, whether you are delivering a functional benefit, a truly emotional benefit, or whether you stand for something more purposeful. Now let's look at the other axis quickly, because that's the part that I would call how to organize for social and digital. Because social makes such huge demand on our traditional marketing organization. We're moving from this 360-degree perspective where we had everything integrated to a global 365 always-on economy, where if you look at the lessons learned from our client Heineken, you move away from planning, which was on a quarterly basis or on a monthly basis, actually to hourly Twitter replies. On a daily basis, they change their Facebook pages. And when there's Champions League football, they are interacting on a moment-by-moment basis. How do you organize for that within the marketing side? It really teases the question of, what do we do? What we see, for example, is many clients bringing back creative departments from their agencies into the company because they can't afford to pay an agency for all those iterations and development of execution of content. You've heard all the buzz around content management. This requires content. And what do our partners do? What's the role of Facebook? And in fact, what does even, if you are in a global brand, what does global do and what does local do? Lots of questions here, and obviously the ultimate question in social is what's earned? What role can the consumer themselves play in helping communicate the benefits of our brand? And this is where it gets interesting, because you are either in the old mode of push, or if you have a more interactive and emotional brand, you can start interacting, you can truly learn, but it requires more people in the organization to be involved and take that learning and do something with it. Or you could be truly open and say, you know what? Every employee is a brand ambassador. And that's where I'm going. But let's have a look at this, because we've really studied this very closely. And lots of organizations are either organized by channel or by function. But what we're seeing, and this is perhaps 1 or 2 steps towards the future, is that the mindset that you need to take is everyone in your company will be a spokesperson. If you think about it, think of all the scandals like RIM, BlackBerry, where some disgruntled employees complain about the leadership and about the strategic direction. Anything anybody says online goes viral very, very quickly. That's the scary part. Now turn it the other way around. If you're proud of what you stand for, anybody that works for you could be telling that story, could be singing your praises. The mindset that a few marketing people that write briefings to communication agencies, or a few corporate communication people could write the PR statements on behalf of the company, that they determine the face to the outside world, that model is broken. And what we see the leaders of the forward-thinking organizations do is say, no, we're letting go. we're trusting and empowering all our employees to sing the brand's praises. But that requires some work. Coca-Cola is a great example to learn from. They were very defensive first, but now they've turned it around and said, no, we want all our employees to be brand ambassadors. And they have just a few very basic rules. By the way, they're public, these rules. And then they say, you know, talk to the world about Coke. Don't give them the secret Coke formula, please. But tell them everything else about Coke. Very forward thinking. But you need to equip people for success then. And so you need to give them the training programs. You need the basic guidelines, for example, on what you do when things go bad. Every big company has that from time to time, including P&G, one of the most organized companies, and their Pampers relaunch in Europe. You need to give them online resources. And very importantly, you need to address the lost generation. These are the people, and by the way, I'm one of them, whose kids aren't old enough yet to teach them about social and digital, and they themselves are a little too old to have practiced and been part of it from day one. Now that's not an issue, except it is an issue, because these are also the people in our companies that are sitting on the budgets. These are the people that are making the decisions about where do we spend money or not. So reverse mentoring, coupling junior people with senior people, is a really good way to get people involved. But it might take more. It might take real training programs, like some of the ones we've developed for big other marketing organizations, or immersion visits. There's people here from Diageo today. They're one of the leaders because they've taken over 1,000 people to Facebook for a week to say, look, we don't know what's going to come out of this, but let's listen and learn from them and then step back and say, what are the implications for the Diageo business? Real immersions to say, we need to understand. So the bottom line is that actually when you match the brand with the social and digital world, we see that if you're functional, there are opportunities there, but they are in the push realm. You know, you can send banners with functional ads to people, great. And if you sell mobile phones, that's actually quite important. But if you have brands that have true emotional benefits, then the opportunities are so much bigger because now you can start having that interaction and really have a dialogue, learn and communicate much more on a one-to-one basis. But if you are a purposeful brand, then the real opportunity is there because not only will consumers speak on your behalf, you could also let all your own employees speak on the brand's behalf. And that's when the magic of social and viral starts to happen. Because people are doing it because they care, not because you're asking them to. And a piece of a warning. If you look at this and now you go home and say, where do I sit as my brand? The first question is, if you are very purposeful and you're not using social, I would say that's a huge missed opportunity. However, if you are very, very functional and you throw your organization open because everybody likes busyness and social, that's actually a huge risk because they're going to be talking about things that aren't purposeful and that might actually hurt you. So the purpose of this model is just to help you map your brand and say, where do we stand and what would be the appropriate organization level for us to address social? And that's really all I wanted to give you. I hope it helps a little bit and thank you very much for your time.